This is We should fill people in on exactly what we're talking about. So we're talking about a skeleton that was discovered that is 1.2 million years older than Lucy. Is that
Yeah, the
correct?
skeleton is, yeah, it's 4.4 million years old.
The
And
oldest known human relative.
well, it's the oldest known skeleton. And actually, this is an
Okay.
important distinction I should make. So, like I said before, skeletons are rare. Um, this is the oldest skeleton. There are three other members of the human family that are older. But the thing is, they're much more fragmentary. They're not anywhere near as complete. Like there's another one from Ethiopia found by the same team that found the skeleton we're talking about. That's some teeth, like a toe bone, a few other broken elements of the skeleton. There's another thing, another species called Auroran from Kenya, which is about 6 million years old. Again, much more fragmentary, some teeth. I think they got a couple thigh bones, partial thigh bones. And then there's a skull from Chad called Sahelanthropus that's about 6 million, maybe 7 years old, depending on whose dating you believe. And that's a very nice skull, but it's a head without body. So,
Right.
so anyway, so there are people sometimes get confused by this. So Artie is indeed the oldest skeleton. It's by far more complete than this other stuff, but there are some fragmentary things that are older, and they all become part of this story too.
And what is the scientific controversy? Do you think is it based on real skepticism, or is ego involved in this? Like, you're laughing.
Ego? So. It's science? What are you talking about?
It's unfortunate, man.
No. These are scientists. No. Yeah.
There's
There's
a lot of egos involved in science, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of egos. There's a lot of disbelief because the skeleton was so surprising in a lot of ways and so contrary to the predictions that many people in science had made, that there was a kind of like a head explode for a lot of people.
So we should break down those particular things that are different than what was expected, right? First of all, it walked upright.
Yeah, so it walked upright. So it's primitive. I mean, if you saw it, if we could go back in a time machine and look at it, this thing, the species name is Ardipithecus ramidus. That's kind of a mouthful, but Artie is the individual skeleton that they found. That's the individual, like you're Joe. You're the individual, and your species is Homo sapiens. That's how you think about this. Ardipithecus ramidus species, Artie, the individual skeleton. So. So the interesting revelations with it is it has upright posture, so it's standing upright, but it's still got the opposable toe. So this is a creature that was in the trees, clearly climbing, but it also appears to be upright, walking with this opposable toe. So everyone knows that sometime deep in the human past there was some kind of arboreal ancestor, some kind of ape. But the question has always been, well, what kind of ape? Does it look like a modern ape, or does it look like, something we've never seen before? And so the surprising thing about Artie is it's actually quite different than the living apes. So it's got this opposable toe, walks upright.
Are the proportions? When chimps have shorter legs than they have arms, is Artie's proportions similar to that?
No, Artie. I mean, it's certainly more ape-like than any of us. But there's a couple interesting things about its proportions. So all the other living apes have longer arms than they do legs because they spend a lot of time climbing. That's long arms, and they have they're different proportions, but they all have that in common. They got longer forelimbs than hind limbs. Artie was a big surprise because it actually had longer legs than forelimbs. I mean, it definitely has bigger hands, has longer arms than we do, but that was a surprise, at least was to me, and I think to at least some of the researchers. And I was talking before about these kind of surprises that appear after the fact. Well, that was one, because the bones are broken. These guys on this research team, it's called the Middle Outwash Research Project. they spent a lot of time, reconstructing this and then estimating, what are the lengths of the pieces that are not there, and then run all kinds of regressions and a lot of calculations and stuff. But so that revelation was sort of a delayed bombshell, if you will, that it actually had these limb proportions that were more like a biped.
And so our legs are longer. Chimps have longer arms. So is this like, does it have almost equal length arms and legs? Like Jamie actually just put a photo of it up here, and I'm getting a chance to take a look at it. Oh, it's fascinating. So it has long legs, almost like a person, but longer arms than we do.
Yeah, longer arms than we do for sure. I think I don't remember the exact name, but I think the calculation they did was that legs are. I think the arms. Yeah, I want to say it's like 90 something percent. So it's pretty close to 1-to-1 of length, but indeed the arms are a bit shorter.
So the surprising part was that it didn't walk at all on its knuckles, being that it was that old.
Yeah. So humans we come from the African apes. That's pretty clear from genetics. That's been clear for a long time. There are two main groups of African apes. There's gorillas and there's chimps. Now, within those, and chimps also includes this other species you might have heard of called bonobos. And within those, there's like debate about, should we divide them into some subspecies and stuff? But, we don't worry about that for now. But anyway, What they all have in common is they knuckle walk. So they got these long fingers, and when they walk, they do this. If you look at a video sometime, you'll see it. And, because our two closest cousins both do that, there was a perfectly plausible theory that human ancestors did it well. So we evolved from a knuckle walking ancestor. There was even a cover story in Nature that the headline was almost that. Humans evolved from a knuckle walking ancestor. So that was the theory. And then so here with Artie, we have a creature that's, it's not the last common ancestor with the African apes, but it's certainly getting closer. It's getting a big step closer. And the people, the anatomists who specialize in these things say that there's like no hint of knuckle walking. Not only was it not knuckle walking to get around, but also it has no vestige of a knuckle walking ancestry. So in other words, there's no like residual anatomy that would suggest that
it ever knuckle walked.
Yeah.
So it was bipedal from the very early days?
Very, very early days of the species.
Of the species evolution.
Well, it's bipedal. All
period.
You know is what you find. At that 4.4 million year old window.
Right.
And then what comes before that is
speculation.
It's these the people that do this. It's intelligent speculation, obviously, but you don't know what you haven't found. And so, now there's a debate about just how long ago the last common ancestor of humans and chimps lived. It's probably at least, anywhere from 1.5 million years before Artie to, some estimates put it even further back than that. So, yeah, there's another school of thought that's kind of emerged that says, well, it still could be a knuckle walking ancestor, that gave rise to humans and Artie, but it just all the stuff had disappeared by the time you got to Artie. Anyway, that's kind of a counter argument that we can get more into that later. I don't want to get too esoteric on you, but
it seems so fascinating that it has these really long arms. But that there's no evidence whatsoever of not only knuckle walking in that species, but knuckle walking as an ancestry.
Right.
Well, there's so many different things that they thought of and believed that, well, there's, so yes,
But cultures aren't static.
Right.
And we're not static. And I think one of the major issues that American Indians have is that we're often stereotyped into this picture. And if we don't fit that, then we're not legitimately Indian. When you first met me, what did you think? Did you think, well, where's her brown skin? Where's the feathers? I mean, this is
No, I did not
I don't think
that.
you did. But I
Some
guess it's a
people do?
rhetorical question. Oh, hell yes. So
Well, are you 100% Native American?
no, absolutely
What
not.
percentage are you?
And that's
Is it
let's talk
racist?
about that. Let's talk
Can you
about
say
that.
that?
What other so blood quantum is an imposition from the federal government that has been used to weed out Native Americans. So the whole idea of U.S. federal policy has been to assimilate Indians, to rid themselves of the Indian problem so that land and resources could be obtained, right? Mm-hmm. And so blood quantum was one way that the U.S. government could do that. So if you didn't meet what they thought was some kind of purity test, then they could write you off, right? But that is not how many Indian nations view tribal citizenship or membership. It's through other types of cultural continuity, family relationships, and it's not about race. That's been an imposition on us. So I'm Polish and Choctaw,
So half and half?
something like
Something
that.
like that. Cynthia Ann Parker is probably a good example of that, right? Because she was 0% Native American, but was purely Comanche.
Right.
The way-
Absolutely.
Italians are very similar. I'm Italian, but I have a last name that's Irish because I'm 1/4 Irish. So growing up around Italians, it was always like a way they made fun of me. You know, it was always a funny thing. Like,
Right.
are you sure you're Italian? You know,
Yeah.
like it's like it's a purity test. Like Italians like a nice last name with a lot of vowels.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they like.
And it's really interesting. So, as executive director of the Association on American Indian Affairs, we get tons of inquiries. Probably the top inquiry we get are people wanting to do DNA tests to determine what tribe they belong to. So everyone seems to want to be Indian. And even some people are emboldened enough to say, you know, hey, I did my DNA test. It says I'm Native American. Where's my Indian check?
Really?
So there's so many misconceptions about what it means to be Native American.
That's a real issue?
Yes, that doesn't exist, but there's some kind of fantasy or myth that many people in the U.S. have kind of believe about Indians because we don't know. It's not like it's taught well in school. It's not like this is part of a normal dialogue.
And can you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that it can really clearly identify what nation you're from.
No, DNA test can't. It
Can
cannot.
identify whether you have certain genetic traits that might be from North America, like Canada, or might be from South America
Right.
as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So if you really want to learn about your history and heritage, you have to do that genealogical research. And if you weren't aware, there's 574 federally recognized tribes and about 300 other tribal groups in the United States and
300
Alaska.
other on top of the 500.
Yeah, that aren't recognized by the United States for many reasons. Wow. And so each one of those tribes have their own laws. They have their own systems of governance, their own, whether it's a traditional form of government or a written constitutional government. And each one of them have their own eligibility requirements for citizenship. So you have to do your own genealogy. And then if you do find who you may be affiliated with, then you go to that nation and you talk to them about what their eligibility requirements are. Some of them are residency, some of them are familial relations, and some of them are blood quantum.
The term Indian, is that okay to use?
That's actually a legal term of art. So Indian is a defined legal term in federal law.
Of art?
It's a legal term of art.
What does that
Sorry,
mean?
I'm a lawyer. That just means that it's a defined federal term that has a specific definition in U.S. code. We tend to like to be called the nation that we belong to,
Right.
who our people are.
So for you, it would be Choctaw.
Choctaw, right.
And for others, whatever, Cherokee, what have you.
A lot of people use Native American, and that's a broad term because that really can define folks from south of the invisible border or north of the invisible border and in the Western Hemisphere. So it's a much broader term. Indigenous peoples is a great term. Yeah.
A lot of people in Canada, they use First Nation.
First Nation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they have a very interesting relationship with First Nation people up there. It's similar but different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have very different rules in terms of like hunting and fishing, and they basically could do whatever they want. Whereas the people that live, I have friends that live in Alberta, and First Nation people can, they don't have hunting seasons. They just do whatever they want. They basically say, look, let's just pretend like we never invaded, and you just live how you would normally, but with modern equipment. So it's a little odd, but there's no way getting around it being odd. It's also striking because you realize over the course of the book, and I mean, and then more books that I've gotten into subsequently, that this was something that was going on before the white settlers even got there. That this way of life and the raiding and the killing, and that's not what we associate Native Americans with. We associate us with taking the Native Americans' land and them fighting back, and that's when things get ugly. But it turns out this was just a wild way of life that they had for who knows how many years.
One of the things that surprised people when I wrote this book, and I didn't know that I was going to be surprising people because I was just reporting what I found, was that very thing, that this was. I think people are often used to the bury my heart at Wounded Knee narrative of Native Americans, which is as victims.
Yeah.
And there's no question that they were victims of a westward rolling empire and 378 broken treaties, and we can just go on and we know what that narrative is like. But the narrative that I told was a narrative of power, of dominance, of power, which came with brutality too. And I think it was a fact. It was a fact that if you go back in time, these Native American tribes, that eventually got crushed, as the Comanches did, and put on a reservation somewhere and had their livelihood taken away from them. But it really, anyway, it's a huge deal, and a narrative that I think, to me, that doesn't take into account the enormous power and dominance and behavior of Comanches is just missing, half the narrative.
Well, it's so fascinating because it's essentially they were living like Stone Age people, and they were doing it very recently. They were doing it like in terms of the way Europe is. You could go and see buildings in Italy that were built long before any of this stuff happened, long before the settlers started encountering them, and they were living like this in this sort of, it's very romantic. The way they live, just chasing the buffalo and killing them, and then eating only buffalo meat, and then doing very little farming, picking some berries and nuts, and that's about it. I mean, it was just eating meat and raiding and killing.
They were hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
They were nomadic hunter-gatherers, which is what they were. And what the horse allowed them to do which is what they had been before. The horse allowed them to do that only just really, really, really well. In other words, they weren't in a position of becoming agricultural Indians. The horse gave them this ability to, and as you said, they got everything from the buffalo: clothing and lodging and tools and saddles and bridles and food. I mean, everything came from the buffalo. So the horse just enabled them to do this on an incredibly sophisticated level.
It's the most sad part of the story is the extirpating of the buffalo. I mean, that's not the most sad, but one of their way of life. It's almost like what happened, but I'm rooting for them in some weird way. I mean, I know that they're not going to win, but there's something about the way they lived. It seems so exciting. They're dirty fucking
Have you ever
diseases.
been to Teotihuacan?
No, I've never been there. I heard it's amazing though.
Something really interesting happened to me there. Now, not only is this square that we went to and stand on this earth mound, and this guy whose nickname was Gorilla giving us this wonderful tour of just a spot, the most romantic tour ever of this place for such a rough place. And he goes, wait right here. And we're in this giant square, and he runs down this dirt mound about, I don't know, say 150 feet away, 200 feet away, and he goes, can you hear me? And it was like, oh my God, I could hear him. He goes, this square was built with these mounds here to be able to speak at this voice to 250,000 people.
Whoa.
And I was like, what? And then we walk. And
That right there? Is that it up there? Well,
Yes.
it's on that screen too.
Well, it's that way and then go left.
You could look this way, so you don't have to look backwards.
Yeah.
So over here. So
So if we were to see that square, if we were to go straight around that pyramid and make a left, that's where those mounds are. And the other thing is, in these, that's the same shot from a different angle. That's near where these shaman lived. The shaman had quarters, like an area of this place. And there's these sort of things, and I said, what are these? And he said, they're reflection ponds. I said, oh, like for like reflecting. And he goes, no, for reflecting. And I'd never considered that you don't look at the stars by going, but that really you look down and you mark. So in 7 years, when it comes around again, you're like, pattern. Because I'm always like, how do you look up and learn a pattern of that?
right.
But by looking down.
Oh, that's crazy. So they had ponds just to look at the reflection of the stars and map them out.
Yeah, the shaman did. That was like in their neighborhood. And the way you were a shaman is if you had a birthmark on your head when you were born, they immediately were like, 2 boards, rope, and just put 2 boards and roped you and
Flatten
began a
your head out.
lifetime of like, so you're a shaman. Which if you had a lifetime of that, you'd be like, hi, shaman. Hey, shaman. I mean,
So it's like being born a royal.
squeeze the shaman.
But
Don't
even-
squeeze the shaman.
Even more weird, right? Because you don't have a history or a bloodline of it. It's just
it's
they
the
find
study
you.
of what we are, and that is significant. Mm-hmm. Because it felt to me immediately like, well, everyone can't do that. We need, you don't have a thing on you, so you.
Yeah, if you don't have the birthmark.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good, entry, at the gate.
When you went to the Aztec temple as a musician, when you're sitting there, did it make sense? Like the acoustics, like the way it's set up, does the way the sound works, does it make sense to you? Like how they constructed it?
It left a very lasting feeling of that we're supposed to be here, and that, it really restored a lot of faith in humanity. I didn't focus on the ritualistic murder that was going on there. It was just that's the one set of people. The other set of people built this, and they knew,
Right.
and they knew, and much like the Great Pyramids that are really, in the shape of Orion's belt, exactly that same concept of like, what's going on here matters, and if that is your focus. Think of how wonderful it could be, how did those people know how to make that with without the, they say without the wheel. That would be like really hard.
That seems insane. Yeah, the Aztecs didn't have the wheel, right? Allegedly. Yeah, how the fuck did they do all that? Well, at least the way they did it physically, you can kind of we know that they murdered 80,000 slaves in a period of just a few days after the construction of that temple.
Yeah, so that was like, don't tell me. Actually, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it.
I think they
like
knew that they were going to be slaughtered. I think it was kind of like part of the gig.
Yeah, well,
Maybe I'm wrong with that. I might be wrong about that.
Well, it doesn't. With that many people, it wouldn't sound surprising that you'd have some cooperation. I mean, it's hard to imagine 80,000 people at once going, sorry, what? And not being like, well, fuck this, man.
Yeah.
That sounds like a cooperative event to me somehow.
Unless they were somehow or another locked up and they brought them out one by one.
That's an awfully big cage you've got there.
Yeah, it isn't. Yeah, 80,000. That's quite an arena.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you'd have to build an extra one of those just to hold them.
Yeah, that's like a giant football arena filled with
it's
people.
That big.
Yeah.
It's that big. And what struck me as just because I play music is I thought okay, that means these acoustics are so perfect. Like, how do you discover that? Are you in a canyon and you're
Right.
like, wow, this sounds? Can you hear me over there? And
Right.
then you sort of triangulate and start doing the geometry for how that works. And like, oh, quick, someone invent geometry first, though, because I don't know. How does that, how manifest itself? That
Right.
understanding.
Yeah, how many thousands of years did it take before they figured out how to construct something?
Yeah,
like
where
that?
someone on their deathbed is like, wait, one last thing
I gotta
about
think.
acoustics.
Sound kind of bounces off shit. You
But it's
gotta.
got to be shaped like this.
Yeah.
With the Pythagorean theorem,
I've never been to any of the Aztec temples, but I went to Chichen Itza and saw some of the Mayan temples, and it just. Whenever you're at a place like that, that's just magical. That's so fucking old and so amazingly constructed. You just think, what the fuck was it like to live back then?
Yeah.
Like, do we have a terrible idea of what they were like? Like,
of course.
yeah, we don't know.
Well, but it sort of dawned on me at some point that it was like, oh, you mean the people that wrote our history wrote it as from the perspective of, by the way, we're way better. But okay, here's the story of these other people.
Yeah, right.
You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Like by
yeah.
some kind of dickhead winner.
Right. A
Yeah.
dickhead winner with guns.
Yeah. Before we get started, I'm better than the person I'm going to tell you about.
Yeah, but
You know?
we can't. Even though we can't do what they did.
Because what is the emotion when you're in that space? I'm trying to think of the right word to describe how I felt there.
Right.
And I guess
Awe. Right.
yeah, it really is. It is awe, but also
Reverence.
there's almost reverence, and there's almost like some strange gratitude.
Yeah.
Like where you're like, thank you I'm so thankful to be part of this, even just by living in a time to appreciate this.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It feels like knowledge expanding that I don't have. So I just feel like, oh, if I could have a piece of that, if I could understand a piece of that. But just standing there is sort of understanding it. you know?
Right. We have such an egotistical perspective when it comes to our personal civilization that like this with the internet and with cars and with planes and all that. This is the best way to
There's
be.
a word for it. I can't. Can you try to find such a thing? There's please.
What is the word?
I don't. There's a word for the word definition is to believe that the era you're in is the finest of them all.
Yes,
Up to this
yes.
point, I think
Yeah, I've heard that word. I know what you're saying. That is a
it's some kind of dickhead syndrome.
exactly.
It certainly was created by a man. There's some guy was like, do the fucking shit.
Yeah, I don't think it was a girl. If it was, she was like one of them alt-right female chicks.
But don't you wish that there was like a supportive mother was like, yeah, sure, honey, you're the best. This is the best.
You're number one.
Just
don't worry about the
him.
pyramids.
Yeah, don't worry about him, guys. He's fine. You're the best.
Yeah, it's like the same thing with the Native Americans and the settlers, that the settlers were imposing their lifestyle, but the people that experienced the Native American lifestyle, they wanted to stay living like that.
For sure. Well,
Yeah.
I think because it omitted so many of the things that the European culture was bringing.
Yes.
It seems like a distinct possibility that the European perspective, like when Pizarro and all that, was it 12 of them conquistadors killed like 1,000 natives in a matter of hours? When they land, they're looking for gold everywhere.
Right.
And at first, they have this belief that something big will come across the water and be their god. And here comes a ship with a bunch of dirty assholes that literally, factually dirty assholes have ridden across a boat. And I think about that perspective where they obviously were like, these people are nice, but I've had enough of this. They should have invented ships. We're better, so let's kill everyone here.
Yeah. Well,
Like
Cortez
it's such
and
an ego.
Montezuma,
That's what I
right?
mean. Cortez.
Yeah.
Cortez. That's who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't know what was going on because I don't think previous to that time they'd ever seen anyone on a horse before.
No, and come across. You imagine a big boat and then a few horses where they're like, "What the fuck is?"
Yeah.
Gary, come over and look at this. It's impossible to fathom.
A man riding a beast. They're probably like, what in the fuck is...
With like rusty armor from being on a fucking boat for months.
Yeah.
Like looking like shit, being desperately like, like. I imagine their relief when they come off on these horses with this armor and all this stuff, and they're like, they're cool. This is gonna be easy, I mean, at first they must have thought maybe we could do this with some goodwill, but quickly it's like, you guys are too primitive. We're just going to take over here. In
I
about 12
doubt they
minutes.
even thought they were going to do it with goodwill. I don't think there was any goodwill back then. I think people were just murdering people.
You think that there's perhaps that more people took more lives in a way,
Well,
like for per capita or something?
I think that it was a more brutal way of taking lives. I'm sure people take more lives today in war, but I think back then it was it was hands-on.
Right, but it seems like more percentage of the people that are alive had an opportunity or the possibility to kill someone than today.
Yeah.
Too. So it's like if you are with 150 people, all of which have killed at least 3 people.
Right.
That's an interesting group.
And then you land on a boat and
You've been there for months and you're like, maybe you are like, we got to kill somebody and rape something and take something as quick as possible.
And you have no idea what the fuck they're saying because you can't speak their language, so it's easy to just...
And they're being nice.
Yeah.
So you're like, they're going to fuck these people up in 5, 4, 3, like that silent count off. It's bizarre.
Well, that's the history of mankind is men showing up in boats and killing everybody that they met.
And then kind of doing their own version of a selfie on the dead body.
Yeah. Right. Getting
from this
paintings.
side. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Draw me.
I would imagine what it would be like if you could be a fly on the wall when Montezuma met Cortez, just to be there and see what that was like when these people who had never encountered Spaniards before, and these guys show up in these boats.
With 2 absolutely different beliefs and perspectives of what's about to go down.
What's crazy is that is why Mexico speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't get that in their head. Like, oh, Mexicans
It's why all of
speak
South America,
Spanish.
except for Brazil, Brazil is Portuguese. You know.
Yeah. I mean, we don't get that in our head. Like, Mexico speaks Spanish. Why do they?
And
it's
has
not
horses.
Spain. Yeah, Spain's way the fuck over there. How is
Where they
what?
speak Spanish.
Yeah, like it makes no fucking sense. But then you realize, like, oh my god, they were conquered by the Spaniards. Whoa.
Yeah, and a long time ago.
Fucking time ago. Long fucking
because
time ago.
I because of having my music teacher as a young boy drilled the song in 1492 from Spain through wind and storm and gale, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa, that
1492,
which by my watch is a long time ago.
It is, but it's not. You know, like I had a joke in my act about the United States being founded in 1776. People live to be 100. That's 3 people ago. That's real, though. I know it sounds fucked up when you hear
Man,
it.
you're funny.
But when you hear it, it sounds like, is he right? Like, that's not right.
Well, what's
Like,
funny
wait a
is
minute, that
that's
is
totally
right.
true.
Yeah, it is right.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's
we just got here.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Yeah, the thing is, anything that happens before you were born seems like a million years ago.
Of course, but also 1776 seems like yesterday to me. I wasn't alive, and I'm ready to admit that. But that seems like, that is just very
Fucking
close. I'm
super
sure.
recent.
Yeah,
It's a conversation that I think is a fascinating one, the conversation of reparations, because there can be no doubt that something horrible happened to the black community and they're still suffering from it, especially in the Deep South when you look at these places where the people who lived are the direct descendants of slaves.
Yeah.
And then these are the same impoverished neighborhoods that no one's ever done anything to try to fix.
Right.
So how do you fix it?
You first have to start with the subconscious mind of the black mind. The problem with the black mind is the fact that the black mind starts off with a defeatist mentality. From the day you're born, you're taught the white man's out to get you. So you start off with a boogeyman, and then you're taught that you're a slave, right? So when your subconscious mind believes that the beginnings of your race is a slave, how do you aspire to be more than that? So in order to correct the black community, you have to teach black history, or so-called black history, or what I would say African history, in chronological order. Before we were slaves, we were kings. So how do you have a whole entire nation of 40 some odd million black people, and majority of them never heard of Queen Angola, who never heard of the Songhai Empire, the Mali Empire, none of this stuff, right? King Mansa Musa. How do you raise the people's level of awareness about this stuff? And how do you elevate them to want to do things in life when they think they are a slave? That's the first thing that you have to do to help black people. You have to teach them who they are.
That expression before they were slaves, they were kings. The problem with that is a king is a monarch, and a monarch is one person who controls giant groups of people. You can't have a bunch of kings. There's not a lot of kings. You can't have a nation of kings.
Correct. But that's very different from saying, that we had 4 kings, right? Let's say there were just 4, right? Mm-hmm. That's better than saying Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and these free slaves, right? You actually have to see at least one king.
I see what you're saying.
At least say.
So see one advanced human being that also looks like you, that came from the same part of the world where your ancestors came from. So recognize that the trajectory that you and your family are on is a direct result of being enslaved. That someone was enslaved in the past and brought over here against their will. Mm-hmm. That's why there's the negative mindset. That's why there's a negative self-image, is because there's this great history of oppression.
Yeah. When you think you're a slave, you can't operate outside of that.
And even if you don't think you're a slave, you think you're inferior. I had, do you know who Miss Pat is?
No.
Hilarious comedian, one of the funniest human beings alive. And she was here, and one of the things she was talking about was when she was younger, that when she would see white people, she wouldn't look them in the eye. She would get nervous. She felt inferior being around them. Mm-hmm. She just wanted to get away. She didn't feel like she belonged.
Right. And that's a product of not knowing who you are, not knowing your own personal power. When you look at the Second Punic Wars of Carthage, you had Hannibal went through the Alps, which is Mission Impossible, and he went all the way to the doors of Rome. And Rome said, "Yo, we ain't coming outside to fight you, bro. We ain't coming." That's how strong the powerful the army was. They said, "We don't want to fight." They knew if they came outside those gates, they would get their ass whooped. So how do you have a people that walk around not knowing that Hannibal Barca is a well-studied war general? Today, the Pentagon still studies him, right? So how are you operating in America as a black person and not know who Hannibal Barca is?
Well, it's difficult, I think, for people that were born in America and all their known ancestors are from America to even relate. Like my family is mostly from Italy and Sicily, and some of them from Ireland. Mm-hmm. I don't relate at all. I visit Italy in the summer times. I don't relate at all.
Right. So then the other psyop is the fact that we were the natives. We were not brought here on slave ships. That's not economically sound. This
what do you mean?
Make sense. So when Christopher Columbus got here, Christopher Columbus got to the Caribbean, according to a primary source.
Right.
They basically said the first thing he did was take slaves. He didn't bring slaves. He took slaves from the island. He captured people. So when you have colonization, you got to remember, the United States was only built 13 colonies at first, right? You think this whole land was empty? No, there were natives here.
Right.
But today we're taught that natives is some other people. No, natives are the melanated African being that has come here since the beginning of the Mali Empire. We're talking about 14th, 13th century. We had already come here from Africa.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had already come here.
To the United States or to
this landmass we call the United States. So the way the ocean current works is it works from Africa, leaves out of West Africa, comes to South America and the Caribbean. That's just how the currents go. You don't need no paddle boat or nothing. The currents will just take you there, and then you travel up. But we had already been here. All you got to do is look up the story of Sarah Rector. Sarah Rector is a wealthy so-called Native American. I think she was a Choctaw tribe or one of these tribes, but she was wealthy, and she wanted a VI pass to go somewhere, and they had her classified as a free person. Why don't we know about the wealthy so-called black people in America? Why don't we know that there were black slave owners in America? Why is that not taught? Why is it not taught?
How many black slave owners were there?
Man, the natives here had slaves. They were trading slaves with the so-called white man.
Well, they definitely did that. Natives enslaved people of other tribes.
Right. So if those people are us, the so-called black man, if those natives were us, then we have to tell that history and say how we did have territories and we did, carry out commerce, and we weren't slaves. We were slave owners.
Right, but the majority of African Americans that lived here were brought over here.
No,
that's
that's not economically sound.
What do you mean by it's not economically sound? Like there were slave
Let's say-
ships, right?
All right, let's say you wanted to have you wanted to sell marijuana, right?
Right.
Would you import marijuana or would you grow it here if it's already here?
Well, it depends on whether or not marijuana grew here.
Well, can
I
you
mean,
grow marijuana here?
You can, but
Okay.
we're just talking about marijuana. Like, what if
So-
we're talking
so-
about something that you can't grow here?
So what I'm saying is people were already here. Does it make sense to go all the way to this other continent to bring people on the boat when we know that half of your stock is going to die? You wouldn't do that.
So, how many people do you think were brought over from Africa on slave ships? Because that definitely happened.
I don't believe it.
What do you mean you don't believe it?
I don't believe that story.
You don't believe that Africans were brought over on slave ships?
Correct. I believe it may have happened, maybe people were brought over as slaves, but I don't think that the black people in America came from Africa on slave ships. I believe the people that were here were slowly conquered. First, they got the East Coast, and then they started spreading out west little by little, conquering. And when you conquer a tribe, what do? You enslave them. They're POWs, right?
Okay.
That's what you do. So after you conquer this tribe, you make them slaves. Now, how do you conquer the natives here? So let's say you got this tribe is warring against this tribe. Well, this tribe goes talk to the white man. White man says, yo, if you help me wipe out these people, then boom, I'll help you with whatever. So they get together and they wipe out this other tribe. Now, guess what? The white man now outnumbers this tribe. So he wipes them out. You just kill two birds with one stone. You just keep moving like that.
But I'm still confused. There's a great history of slave ships being brought over from Africa with Africans that became slaves and worked in the South. You think that's lies?
History is his story.
Right.
What about my story? Is my story not valid?
But if you do 23andMe on someone who is from these parts of the country, you'll find out that
23andMe?
Well, that's real.
So
what is 23andMe?
When I take a 23andMe test, right?
Yes.
What's it going to tell me about Africa?
That's a good question. We should find
It's
out.
probably
We
going to
should take
say,
one.
"Oh, you're from Kenya, or you're from Angola, you're from this, right?"
Right.
These things, these borders, were created by Europe.
In terms, yes,
Right.
In terms of like what parts of Africa and how it's distributed and what's a country and what's not a country.
Yeah,
right.
these
by
names-
the Afrikaners and Dutch. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't classify me based upon a European name.
I understand that, but they're saying geographically, geographic location, you can call it whatever name you want.
Right.
They can tell you where your genetics originated. Like
Right.
I've got some weird shit in me. I got like 1% Asian. I don't know why it's there. 1.6% African.
Okay.
There's also weird stuff that you find in your DNA that like your ancestors and ancestors' ancestors.
So
Someone
let's
was
walk
somewhere.
down that. Let's walk down that
Right.
path, right? So either way, if you take black people here in America and you do their DNA sample and it point back to Africa, what does that say? It says black people in America are Africans. Now, the argument is, were we brought here or were we already here? Did we bring ourselves here or did the white man bring us here? You see, when you say the white man brought us here, what you're doing is you're removing our ability to transport ourselves. You're saying, oh, we didn't know anything about boats. That's what you're trying to tell me. You're trying to tell me that we didn't know that there was a landmass here. Only the holy white man knew there was land to the west. But when you look at the holy white man, he said, when we got here, we met black people. Go look at the primary source. We got here, we met black people. When we got to the Caribbean, we met black people. You think the Caribbean is right next to America and they weren't in America?
That's interesting.
Doesn't
But
make any sense.
Well,
When you go to
it
South
makes sense that you do have people that have traveled, whether it's Polynesians that traveled to Hawaii or people. I mean, there's the Olmecs who
Yes.
were thousands and thousands of years ago in South
Yeah.
America. They have clearly African faces.
Yes.
Really, the noses, the lips. I mean, they look African.
Right.
And that was a South American culture that existed, and we don't know anything about them other than the fact that they have these gigantic stone sculptures that have African faces.
Well, like again, just go to, if you can pull up the ocean currents. If you pull
No,
up,
I've seen that.
You've
yeah.
seen that, man.
Well, do
It
you
all
know who Graham
goes-
Hancock is?
I've heard
read-
about him. Yeah.
You read his stuff. It's really
I got
fascinating
you.
because he's all about that. He's all about the fact that the idea that human beings were probably living in advanced civilizations far longer than 14,000 years ago, and they did travel all over the world, and that you do find the remnants of these ancient cultures that we have no explanation for throughout the Amazon, and throughout different parts of South America and Central America.
I mean, when you go and you look at real European history, right? You had the Magyars would believe that if they took a bath, that was bad.
Right.
They didn't even want to change their clothes. They thought that dirty was purity. When we talk about the Moors going into Spain and into Europe, the stories in the history, our history, says that when we met the so-called Caucasian, he was sleeping in the barn with the animals, and we told him, no, you can't sleep in the barn with the animals. We taught them etiquette. We taught them running water. We brought that technology to Europe. Now, if we brought the technology to Europe that saved Europe from the Black Plague, you mean to tell me that if we saved the white race, that we weren't already in America already? When we brought the technology? When Rome was dependent on Africa for food? Remember when the Black Plague hit Rome? The cause was one of the officials was stealing the grain that was coming from Africa. So there was famine, hit Rome. If your source of sustenance is from Africa, how are you superior? You're not. You get your food from me. So if you get your food from me, who's more likely to travel this globe? Me, I'm the source of food. And that's the first thing you need to survive on this planet. So if your whole civilization is depending on me to supply food, I made it to America first. It's just that you won the war and you got to tell the story.
Is that their only source of food? I mean, it's a source of food that Rome had, right? But Rome is also very close to Africa.
Well, let's talk about that. What kinds of food did they have?
Well, I don't know.
It's very rudimentary. It was a very rudimentary civilization. It wasn't all what is cracked up to be. When you go look at what the Greeks said about Egypt when they go into Egypt, it's like, it's like the New York City of that time.
The ultimate. If you really want to talk about African civilization being advanced, Egypt is the ultimate, because Egypt to this day is still unexplained. No one really understands how they built those things. No one understands how old the culture is. That's another thing that Graham Hancock and Dr. Robert Schoch from Boston University, who's a geologist, he's pointing to water erosion and the Temple of the Sphinx that leads you to believe that that place might have been as old as 9,000 plus BC. So,
it absolutely is.
Yeah, well,
if not older, going back to Pharaoh Ramses.
There's also different styles of architecture, right? There's older styles of architecture they find deeper in the sand. They think it might have been indicative of an earlier kingdom. And then there's also the Nubian structures of some of the faces, particularly the Sphinx.
Yeah.
The Sphinx, they believe, had a lion's face, and then when they were conquered by the Nubians, they changed the actual structure of the face of the Sphinx and turned it into a king's face.
Well, the way it was taught to me
face.
was that there's Upper and Lower Egypt. So Upper Egypt is actually our New South, right? That's our South. And what the way it's taught to me was that was the mind of Egypt, and the economic section of Egypt was what we see Giza pyramids. And it's economic because if you look at it, it sits between 3 continents on the Mediterranean Sea. So it's a perfect place to carry out commerce. It's the perfect place. That's why everybody wants to be there. That's why there's a war in the Middle East, because it's a perfect place to be. You know what I mean?
So do you believe that some Africans came over here in slave ships, or none?
Very minimal.
Very minimal, really?
Very minimal.
So you think it's a myth?
Almost.
Now, is there any scholars that support these opinions? Are these your opinions? Or where are you getting this from?
So here's the thing. This is stuff I've studied probably close to 15 years ago. So I don't remember a lot of my sources or who I learned it from, but I can give you a couple of names. What you got to do is you got to look up Shaka Akmos. You got to look up Dr. Kaba Kameen, Dr. Phil Valentine, Bobby Hemmett. Who else is a good Egyptologist? Shaka Akmos is a real good Egyptologist. I think you should start there with Shaka Akmos. But these are videos I used to watch and lectures I used to watch back in the day. Now I focus on like startups, and that's where my brain is. That's where my knowledge is focused on.
Right.
But a lot of this stuff comes from my own common sense. It just does not make sense logistically to take people from all the way from over there to bring them here, especially when half your stock is going to die, when you got people right here. You have human resources right here. All I got to do is pop them, shoot a couple of them. The rest of them are like, all right, fine, and you enslave them. And none of them die except for the ones I actually killed, right? I got a whole millions of people right here. Like, why would I go all the way across the ocean to bring people back across the ocean? It just doesn't make sense. It's just stupid. Nobody run a business like that.
What's up, Jamie?
PBS, the title was how many slaves landed in the U.S.?
Mm-hmm.
Well, scroll that up. Scroll that up so I can read that whole thing.
Okay.
Right to there. Perhaps you, like me, were raised essentially to think of the slave experience primarily in terms of our black ancestors here in the United States. In other words, slavery is primarily about us, right from the Crispus attacks and Philip Wheatley, Benjamin Banneker, and Richard Allen, all the way to Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and Frederick Douglass. Think of it as an instance might think of as African American exceptionalism. In other words, it is the black experience. It's got to be about black Americans. Well, think again. The most comprehensive analysis of shipping records over the course of slave trade is the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, edited by professors David Eltis and David Richardson. While the editors are careful to say that all the figures are estimates, they believe that the best estimates that we have, the proverbial gold standard in the field, the study of the slave trade between 1525 and 1866, in the entire history of the slave trade to the New World, according to the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, 12.5 million Africans were shipped to the New World. 10.7 million survived the dreaded Middle Passage, disembarking in North America, the Caribbean, and South America. How many of those 10.7 million Africans were shipped directly to North America? Only about 388,000. That's right, a tiny percentage. So a small percentage of all the Africans that were enslaved were actually shipped to North America.
That's probably close to the truth. They ain't come from Africa, bro. That don't make no sense. Nobody run a business like that.
Well, they're saying that a lot of people did, though. That's 10.7 million people.
Came on boats?
That's what they're saying. That's
Well,
the
they were in the
transatlantic
slave trade. I don't know if that means that they necessarily came here. They could have been going to Europe. They
Well,
could have
no,
been
they
going
were
to the
saying
Caribbean.
that. They were saying that it was in
The
Caribbean.
slave trade does not have to come from Africa. I can trade with you right here in America.
But was it why they?
No, it said directly to North America is only the under 400,000.
Right.
Right.
Involved in the shipping and going all over the world. They could be going anywhere.
But
Right.
from Africa,
That's
correct?
less than 10%.
Africans shipped, yes.
Right. That's
Yeah.
less than 10%.
Less than 10% in North America, but 10.7 million Africans enslaved
12.
and moved. Well, yeah, 10.7 survived, right?
Were shipped, but it didn't say where they were shipped. It's just
Right.
to the New World. The New World is very
Vague.
arbitrary.
And
Yeah, it could be
only
anything.
388,000 actually made
Came
it
to this
to North America.
Yeah, this land.
I could trade
So-
from Haiti or Jamaica or South
Right.
America.
So you think that, yeah, right. So you think that there was probably already a significant population of Africans that were seafaring that made it all the way over here.
Yes.
Well, if you listen to the words of Hancock and the discussion of prehistoric, what we would consider prehistoric use of boats and ships, it's probably likely.
Like, look at ancient Egypt. Don't you see pictures of boats?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So-
Well, they would bury them. I mean, if you could, there was the, what is the big science museum in L.A. that had the Egypt exhibit really recently? It's fucking incredible. But
Yeah.
they had a depiction of the boats that they used.
Yeah.
I mean, they had boats, for sure.
They had
They
boats.
definitely traveled.
So how can you tell me that a civilization had boats before Europe was literate, didn't come to America, didn't set up shop? It's just not common. I mean, I don't need to read a book to understand that.
But definitely makes sense if they made it to South America. I mean, if the Olmecs were, I mean, if you pull up an image of the Olmec heads. This is heavily disputed.
John
But-
Henrik Clark is an author you should study. John Henrik Clark has a book, They Come Before Columbus.
I mean, look at that. Look at these Olmec heads.
Yeah.
They all looked like that.
Yeah, that's South America.
Yeah.
So
it's
if you have
amazing.
there has to be a large population of people in order to create these things, right?
Yeah.
It has to be, they have to be advanced. So if they're here already in South America, why you gonna go across the sea when you got people right here you could just enslave? South America is connected to America. You think we didn't come up north? You think we didn't take that walk?
Right.
That's just common sense.
Well, particularly when they're finding all this evidence of people that were here thousands and thousands of years before they ever thought people were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the evidence in the Grand Canyon from Egypt.
What? I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
What's that?
Is you heard about that?
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
There might be some gold down there.
Is this
Egyptian gold in the Grand Canyon?
Hey,
Imagine if they found a fucking Egyptian tomb in the Grand Canyon.
there's Egyptian stuff that's been found in Ohio.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
All
Well, I
over
was
there.
looking some stuff up, but the Graham was telling me, I went home and looked up the Serpent Mound stuff, and like right up the road from where the Serpent Mound is, there's been a couple artifacts found there, like 100 years
Egyptian
ago.
artifacts.
They're called mounds.
Pull that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's mounds in America, which
Yeah.
supposed to be like pyramids or whatever. So
There's even in Egypt, Ohio. I don't think it's named after that, but it's literally like in the same spot.
Wow.
Yeah,
yeah, this
The history of human travel is fucking fascinating, man.
circumnavigated this globe before, man. This isn't new stuff. It's new to Europe. It wasn't new to the African race, man. We've been here. They got the mounds, the archaeological evidence from Egypt and the Grand Canyon. It's right there.
See, I've never heard that before. That is interesting. The archaeological evidence in the Grand Canyon.
Because
in
it's
Egypt.
not part of his story. He's got to keep you thinking. He's got to keep the black people thinking you were slaves and you came from Africa on boats. That's what they got to keep you thinking.
But you really think that there's some sort of a grand conspiracy to withhold information?
Yeah.